He never really won a primary to gain his position in the first place. And so what we did was that we started to kind of look into the history of what was going on. And we saw that our representation had been taking in enormous sums from private interest groups, from luxury real estate developers, from big pharma, from Wall Street, from private equity, and that he was voting along those lines instead of getting things done for working class Americans here at home. And so when we kind of saw all of those things put together, and the fact that we haven't had a primary in 14 years, we realized that we need to change the guard here at home, and we also need to change the guard federally as well.
Amazing. So you mentioned that he was appointed, so he was never elected to his position?
That's right. New York has a pretty wild system where if you know the loopholes, and if you have the buy-in of the incumbent, which many of these political machines operate that way, the incumbent, basically the previous incumbent, his name was Thomas Manton. He decides, you know what, I'm done, but I need to name my successor. I don't want to risk opening New York 14 to a democracy, right? So what he did was that he pretended that he was running for re-election. And he says, I'm running, guys, I'm going to be running again. And as a 20-year incumbent, nobody had challenged him. This was in 1998. Now, at the last minute before the candidate filing deadline, he says, oops, I'm not going to run anymore. We're talking about within hours before the deadline. And so in the state of New York, when that happens, a committee decides who becomes the Democratic nominee. And in a district that's 85% Democrat, you have named your successor. And that is how Joseph Crowley became the congressman for New York 14. And he's had the seat ever since. He's never been challenged in a one-on-one primary. And he hasn't been challenged in a primary at all in 14 years. And so we decided that legacy needs to end, and that we need to kind of reintroduce democracy to our community, and we need to break up these Tammany Hall political machines that have led to the disenfranchisement and the economic disenfranchisement of working people, of people of color, and that have led to just not really pushing the needle on important issues like Medicare for all, criminal justice reform, and more.
Wow. So again, he was never elected. So that just surprised me. So they have that type of system in the state, the way it's set up. So he went I'm not running, and so I know these people up on this board, they're gonna just elect me. So that's kind of what happened. That's interesting. So I saw a little bit about his financial contributions. He gets some of the donations from real estate developers and a lot of these big groups. I guess, can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how it directly affects your neighborhood?
Yeah, for sure. So it's no secret that New York City, our cost of living has just exploded out of control in the last 15 years, maybe even a little bit longer. Pretty much since Crowley attained office, cost of living in New York City has absolutely exploded. And one of the main ways in which cost of living has exploded, not just in New York City, but in urban areas across the United States and cities across the United States, is in real estate. It's in rent. And the cost of rent has been skyrocketing in New York and across the country. And so when you open the books on where Joe Crowley gets his money from, the number one industry is real estate. It's one of his top one or top two industries. It's real estate. And what you've seen is that there's actually a whole system set up here whereby he uses his dual positions as both the congressman and the chairman of the local Democratic Party to both pass legislation on a federal level. Like, for example, in 2015, he authored and passed what was known as FIRPTA, which is a deregulation bill of financial real estate investors, foreign investors. And what he did was that he authored and passed a bill deregulating some of that dark money. And then on a local level, what he does in his position as the chairman is that he appoints and has a very heavy hand in inserting city council members, inserting state assembly members, inserting state senators, the same way that he was inserted. He inserts others. And what he does is that he inserts people on a New York City level that legislate to advance the agenda of these luxury real estate developers. So what they do is that they pass the bag to him, and they get a return on their investment through city rezonings, through basically him and his proteges forcing through developments that are deeply unpopular in the communities, like right here in 82nd Street in Jackson Heights. The entire community, street vendors, small business owners, local residents, they all fought enormously against this luxury development rezoning that's going up. You know, we're talking about one of the most crowded school districts in America, and this community was fighting for a new school to be built so that their kids don't have to go to school in trailers behind their schools. And so this community needed a school, but the schools don't make money for luxury developers.
Oh, right.
What they needed was a 13-story luxury development. And so what they did was that they applied for this zoning. The whole community fought against it. I was there. There were 300 people that showed up to a community hearing. But the city council member for that area was my opponent's protege. He didn't even show up to the public hearing. And then he approved the rezoning. He approved the rezoning. And so when we talk about money in politics, it's not just what's going on a national level. Basically, this lobby is giving him money, and he's deregulating and creating a total payday on a national level, but then also in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the United States, if not the world, in New York City. And so they give to him, and he delivers for them. And at no point are the concerns of working families considered. And so that's just one area.
That's just one, right? Oh my goodness.
That's just one industry. Yeah.
That's crazy. So did that rezoning ever take, so it did take place. So they got their return on their investment, I guess.
Yeah. So it's still in the process of getting the final approval, but so far it's just gotten rubber stamped every step of the way, and it looks like it's going to get rubber stamped at the last stage. So unless we have a miraculous turnout, but miraculous turnout has happened, and that still hasn't stopped them from steamrolling over the basic mechanisms of democracy in New York City. So this community has used every single instrument of democratic means to say no, but big money has found a way because they have captured and purchased the people who are supposed to be working for us. And instead, now they're working for them. And so the only solution is to replace them.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to bring the focus to the campaign. That's a great point. So I guess talk to us a little bit more about your issues, what you stand for. I'm sure I saw you're standing for Medicare for All. I'm very progressive. So talk to our viewers a little bit about your stances and about New York City, I guess. Yeah,
for sure. I'm proud to kind of champion a very progressive platform. But I think what's important too is that in this year, in 2018, almost everyone wants to call themselves a progressive nowadays. The guys that are taking $3 million from Wall Street are calling themselves progressive now because they know that that's what people want. And it's really easy to muddy the water and say, I co-sponsored Medicare for All. Well, where were you the last 20 years? Oh, yeah. So how can we trust you to champion that after November 6th? We can't, because you can't serve two masters. You can't take money from the people profiting off our despair and expect to fight back against them. And I think our community is smarter than that. So I'm proud to actually be the progressive candidate in this race. I'm proud to champion Medicare for All, a federal jobs guarantee, the abolishment of ICE, a Green New Deal. I'm very proud to push the needle forward and not just do that in New York 14, but what we've been accomplishing in the process of this campaign is changing the national conversation. because our campaign was one of the first ones in the country to say abolish ICE. We were one of the first campaigns in the country to talk about a federal jobs guarantee. And now we have started a movement in those two areas across the country. Now, Cory Booker's got a federal jobs guarantee plan. You know, it's not quite the same,
right,
but even he's talking about these things. And now we've got almost everybody who wants to be considered a presidential contender in 2020 getting off corporate PAC money. And that started with us. It didn't just start with me, but it started with progressive candidates across the country. Now the question is, do they authentically mean those things or not? And then when it comes to that, it comes to the industries where you take your money from. And so it comes to your average dollar donation. It comes to the amount of donors that you have. And it also comes down to, are you doing this because it's popular, or are you doing this because it's right? And I'm really proud to be part of that first kind of cavalry of progressive candidates that did it first because it was right. We didn't do it because we knew it was going to work. We didn't do it because everybody was doing it. We first started doing it because it was right. And by doing that, we already changed this country. And we're going to change it even more when we go to Congress.
Absolutely. And when you're in Congress, too, you're going to be doing great stuff along with a lot of other progressives you're elected. So I guess for our viewers who are, unfamiliar with you, introduce yourself to our viewers, I guess. Tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got involved in politics.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. I'm running for Congress in New York's 14th District. And a little bit about me. So I'm a third-generation Bronxite. I was born here. My dad was born here. My grandmother came here from Puerto Rico. So on one side, I'm a third-generation Bronxite. Yeah, that's right. I'm Boricua, totally. And on the other side, I'm kind of have something of a first-generation or second-generation experience where my mom was born and raised in Puerto Rico and came here when she was in her 20s. So my parents met up there, got married, came here, and had me. And at a very young age, my mom, who was like learning English while she was raising me, I think my mom and I were learning English at the same time to a certain extent. So my mom was kind of looking around, and she wanted me to have the same educational opportunities as any average kid in the United States. And so public schools in the Bronx in the late 80s and early 90s were just not an equitable option for children. And so they looked around and they were kind of panicking because we couldn't afford private school tuition and we couldn't afford any of those things. And so what we did was that we kind of gathered my whole family, my extended family, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, and we all pitched in for this tiny down payment in a small house about 30 minutes north of the Bronx. So at that time, my dad had a small business in the Bronx. We had been living there. My whole family was there. But I had to go 30 minutes north so that I could go to a public school that gave me a chance in life. And it was from that point that I think, at least subconsciously, I knew that the zip code that I was born in had determined the destiny that I had determined the opportunities that I had, and that the zip code that my family was born in was chronically underprovided with opportunity, that like we don't have opportunity for all in this country. And my whole upbringing was defined by that 30-minute commute between that little town and the Bronx. That our air was different, our schools were different, everything was different. And as a kid, I knew that that was wrong. As a kid, I knew that it was not fair that my teachers were better than my cousin's teachers because I was 30 minutes away. Like, I knew that that was wrong. And, you know, like, even as a kid, I had like fantasized about my cousins moving into my house with me so that they could go to the school that I could go to. And I think at a very young age, that instilled in me just a value to try to change the world around me. And things usually only make sense going backwards. So I didn't know that this is how that would be expressed. But I knew that that was my value my whole life. You know, it's that refrain of Dr. King's, which is life's greatest question is, what am I doing to help others, to serve others? And so, you know, when I was 18, I was very involved in the sciences, and I went into college as a pre-medical student, but that eventually and quickly pivoted to studying economics. I graduated. I moved back to the Bronx. I worked in education. I had also worked in immigration casework. When the financial crisis hit, my father passed away, and my family was back to cleaning homes and driving school buses, and I was waitressing and bartending to help my family keep a roof over our heads. And when the 2016 election rolled around, I helped organize for the Bernie Sanders campaign. And after the insanity of the general election, I kind of took all my stuff with a friend of mine, and we hit the road, and we went to Flint, and we went to Cleveland, and we went to, you know, we stopped in small towns in Indiana, and I ended up at Standing Rock. And it was at Standing Rock that my journey to Congress and that decision, I think, kind of started, where the day I got off camp, I got that call from Brand New Congress asking if I'd be willing to run. And that was like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now. And what seemed so crazy at that time is now, like, we're 30 days before the election. And you connect these dots in reverse, you know? And I think that there's this, you know, there's a movement at our back. That's the only way I can do this, is because this is not about me, this is about us. You know, it's that classic line.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have a wonderful story, by the way, and I'm sorry to hear about your loss as well. So, you know, talk to us about maybe how our viewers can support your campaign and any other statements you'd like to provide to our audience.
For sure. So we've got 30 days until the election. What I need every single person to do is join us in hopping on those phones at ocasio2018.com/call. Join our dialer. It's open all day, but we really try to get people there between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. with kind of our highest volume at 7 p.m. all Eastern Standard Time. And the best thing that you can really do is hop on and help us call voters, because we've got 30 days until the election, and we just need a massive effort of phone banking and organizing before this race. It's extremely, extremely important that we get that done. And then, of course, ocasio2018.com, donate. We really could always use donations. Our average donation is about half of Bernie's, so we're trying to get to that 27, but right now it's 14 for the 14th, and I'm fine with that. But we need to just really just keep the wheels on, keep funding this campaign, and of course, just please hop on those phones. You know, I know sometimes people our age, you've got that social anxiety of calling people, but you know, tough luck. We got to do it. If we really want to make this revolution real, we got to do things we've never done before.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I just wanted to go ahead and thank you again for joining our program. I'm sorry we joined a little bit late. So everyone, go to ocasio2018.com and definitely donate and support her. Thank you so much again for joining. I look forward to interviewing you when you're elected to Congress.
Great, thank you. Yeah.